The Broken Promise. Once upon a time in Aremo. In the heart of Aremo village, there lived a poor but hardworking farmer, Baba Tunde. He had a wife and 3 children to care for, but despite all his efforts, his farm barely produced enough food to feed them. One fateful evening, as he sat outside his mud hut, sighing at the little harvest from his struggling farm, a mysterious woman arrived in the village. She was Madame Folake, an elderly trader known for her wisdom and kindness. Seeing Baba Tunde's suffering, she called him aside and handed him a small bag of seeds. "These are special seeds," she whispered. "Plant them with honesty, tend to them with care, and when the harvest comes, share half of it with the poor in this village. If you do this, wealth will never leave your household." Baba Tunde fell to his knees in gratitude. "I promise, madam. I will do as you say." With renewed hope, he went home and planted the seeds on his farm. The miracle harvest. Months passed, and to Baba Tunde's amazement, his farm began to flourish like never before. The crops were greener, the fruits larger, and the yams bigger than he had ever seen in his life. People in the village gathered in shock. "Is this not Baba Tunde's farm?" they whispered. "How is he suddenly so blessed?" Baba Tunde, now filled with pride, harvested his crops and stored them in a big barn. But then, the day came to fulfill his promise. His wife, Tunde, reminded him, "Husband, don't forget your promise to Madame Folake. Half of this harvest belongs to the needy." But greed whispered in Baba Tunde's ear. "If I give half away, what will be left for me? After all, I did all the work." So, he lied. He told the villagers that his farm did not produce as much as expected. Instead of sharing, he sold most of the crops in secret and used the money to buy more land and build a bigger house. His heart was now full of pride and greed. The very next planting season, something strange happened. No matter how much Baba Tunde plowed and watered his land, nothing grew. The soil became dry, and his seeds refused to sprout. Meanwhile, the other villagers, who had planted their crops honestly, had a great harvest. Confused and desperate, Baba Tunde ran to find Madame Folake. But when he arrived at her hut, he found it empty. She was gone. Only a small note was left at the door. "A broken promise brings a broken life. Greed is a seed that only grows misfortune." Suddenly, everything became clear. He had betrayed his promise, and now, the land that once blessed him had turned against him. With no food, his wealth disappeared. The big house he built, he was forced to sell it to survive. The villagers he once ignored, they refused to help him. In the end, Baba Tunde lost everything: his farm, his money, and his dignity. And as he sat under a dying tree, hungry and full of regret, he whispered to himself, "If only I had kept my promise." Moral of the story. Heavy checkmark: greed leads to destruction. Heavy checkmark: a broken promise will always come back to haunt you. Heavy checkmark: true blessings come from honesty and kindness.